slot canyons in Zion. If we see the unusual spectacle of someone walking through the desert in a wetsuit and carrying a rope, well, that means we're getting close. Why, you might be wondering, would anyone wear a wetsuit in the middle of the desert? Well, one thing that's obvious about the landscape here is that when it rains, the ground is not going to absorb all that much water. Even a brief 15-minute thunderstorm, that can result in enough runoff to turn a dry wash into a raging rapid. As these watercourses become more pronounced with time, they begin to carve deeper and narrower canyons into the surface of the rock and begin to drain even larger areas. Where this gets interesting for adventurers is what happens when you decide to explore one of these drainages. It's called canyoneering, and it's actually a very popular sport in this part of the country. Dropping into a narrow slot and following its sinuous path downstream can take you to some very magical, spooky places that are rarely seen by others. And because the bottom of the canyon is so deep, it may rarely, if ever, see any sunlight. That means it can be surprisingly cold down there. Some canyons can be explored without equipment, but most require a rope, which you use to rappel over dry or running waterfalls, sometimes more than 100 feet high. Without a wetsuit, hypothermia could set in very quickly. Keyhole Canyon is particularly famous as a beginner's canyon, as it's relatively short and does not require a lot of technical expertise. We can't see it from the road, but we may pass people who are either getting ready to make a descent or who have just finished. Canyoneering does have its risks. Keyhole Canyon was the scene of one of Zion's worst tragedies in September 2015, when 7 hikers from California became trapped in the canyon during a flash flood and were swept away. Indeed, the possibility of getting caught in a flash flood is what makes canyoneering so dangerous. This particular rainstorm increased the volume of water in the canyon from 55 cubic feet per second to an incredible 2,630 feet per second in 15 minutes. This is a good moment to remind ourselves of the #1 rule when visiting Utah. Always check the weather report. If a thunderstorm is forecast for the afternoon, stay away from drainage areas, and of course, never try and drive through an active wash. Is considerably different than the main canyon. For starters, there's much less water and much less shade. Scrubby juniper and pinyon pine trees poke up from the red and white layered sandstone formations that ripple across the horizon in every direction. In fact, there's so much rock here that you'll often be hard-pressed to find soil. We generally hear this colorful rock surface referred to as slick rock. Slick rock is the hallmark of East Zion, and many other places in Utah as well, such as Moab. Did I mention I have tours in Moab too? But what is slick rock? If you look it up in the dictionary or even on Google, you won't find a very detailed definition. Is it really as slippery as the name suggests? Well, that depends on who you ask. The name actually comes from early cowboys and ranchers whose horses had a hard time finding footing in their iron horseshoes. Regular hikers, in contrast, probably won't find the walking very treacherous, though it is certainly sandier in places, so you'll want to wear shoes with grippy soles, that's for sure. For mountain bikers, meanwhile, slick rock often translates into pure joy. The open, rolling landscape is filled with obstacles to navigate, and a bike's tough, stubby tires actually get great traction on the sandpaper-like surface. The town of Moab in eastern Utah is well known as the promised land of mountain biking. But some of the mesas outside Zion provide similar thrills and terrain. Mountain biking shops in Springdale can supply you with more information about local trails. Construction of the 1.1-mile tunnel took 3 years. And when it finally opened in 1930, it was the longest non-urban tunnel in the United States. The 6 giant windows, called galleries, not only provide light and ventilation, as you can imagine, they were also used to dispose of debris during construction. And as you can also imagine, there was a lot of rock to get rid of. In total, some 146 tons of dynamite alone were needed to blast through the cliffs. There was even one incident where a 10-ton chunk of sandstone got blown into the workers' dining hall. That, of course, caused a whole lot of consternation, but remarkably, that's all, no injuries. As we get closer, you may find that the traffic often stops. This is because of size restrictions. Large vehicles, in particular RVs and buses, need both lanes to go through the long tunnel. So rangers at both ends close the tunnel to traffic in one direction to let these vehicles through. Trails in East Zion. It's a short 1-mile trail that's located right before the Zion Mount Carmel tunnel entrance. It's a fun scramble through the desert, over slick rock and around overhanging ledges, with a narrow slot canyon to peer down into as well. I do recommend it if you don't mind a little bit of physical activity. The trail ends at the top of a stupendous overlook, with views back over the lower canyon and the Sentinel and Altar of Sacrifice. Although this trail is short, it's quite rugged and steep in sections. Make sure you're wearing good shoes and carrying a hiking pole or stick. That can be helpful if you're worried about the terrain. I'll point out the parking areas. tunnel. Make sure we turn on our headlights and drive slowly. It should take about 2 minutes to get to the other side. I'll see you there. We're going to go around 5.5 switchbacks to help us drop 1,000 feet to the valley bottom, and on the way we'll catch glimpses of the Great Arch. The best place to see it from is the second hairpin, which is the first one that bends to the left for us. So as the road starts turning hard left, pull into the open space on the outside of the curve. At 600 feet wide and 400 feet high, if the Great Arch were a true freestanding arch, it would easily be the largest in the world. However, as you can see, it's not a real arch, but what's called a blind arch. That means it's still attached to a rock face. Arches in Zion form through a combination of traction and erosion. Water seeping out through the bottom of a still-forming arch can erode the stone below. The freeze and thaw cycle causes further cracking, all of which undermines the harder stone above, which will eventually break off because there's nothing left to support it. This results in the creation of an alcove like we see today. There are many other true freestanding arches in Zion, though they're all a little harder to find. driver keeps doing a great job of getting us down these tricky switchbacks without driving, it's time for us to think about our strategy for one of Zion's biggest challenges: parking. Where are we going to park the car? Traffic jams and lack of parking spaces is potentially the biggest single headache we'll encounter on our visit. But take a deep breath and relax. We can find a solution. Zion's main canyon is closed to private vehicles from March through October, meaning that all visitors are required to take the free park shuttle, which leaves from the visitor center. Since we're already in the park, we may as well circle the visitor center lot once to see if we can snag a free spot. But if it's already past 9 a.m. and before 5 p.m., unfortunately, we will probably have to exit the park via the south entrance and park in the town of Springdale, because there's a strong chance the visitor center parking lot will have already filled up. If we have a hotel reservation in Springdale, definitely park your car there. If not, we should be able to find street or lot parking, which unfortunately we will have to do. Once we find a spot, what we'll do is hop on the free-town shuttle, which will take us back to the entrance station. Then from there, we can just walk across the footbridge to the park shuttle. Since you've already purchased entry to the park, it's important that you remember to take your receipt or park pass with you so that we don't have to pay again. Do not forget to bring the pass. The town shuttle is a great way to get around Springdale, no matter what time of day it is, even when you're going out for dinner. And also, if we have to use the shuttle, don't forget to take your phone and some earbuds so you can keep listening to my commentary while we ride on the bus. go around the last water switchback, we'll be approaching Canyon Junction. The Canyon Junction, the main canyon road, which is the right-hand turn, is closed to private vehicles, unless it's winter or you've reserved a coveted room at the Zion Lodge. There's a slight chance that we'll find a parking spot on the stretch of road right before you reach the Canyon Junction shuttle stop. If you do, grab it, and then go out and buy a lottery ticket when we get into town. You can leave the car here and take the shuttle the rest of the way, but most likely, as already discussed, you'll need to find a parking spot either at the visitor center or in the town of Springdale, and then return here on the shuttle for the trip up the Canyon Road.